The new arbiters of truth, the very people who have misled the American people, want to tell you what's truth and what isn't. The Biden administration this week announced a new Disinformation Governance Board within the Department of Homeland Security, the second largest agency behind the Department of Defense. Biden has placed Nina Jankowicz to run this division, who has tweeted misinformation in the past several years, including these tweets that President Trump colluded with Russia and that Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation. This, of course, coming to us years after all of the disinformation from Democrats.
Our message has been straightforward and simple, and it's true. The border is closed.
The data shows that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary.
You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion, pretty compelling evidence.
Nothing has changed about what I said yesterday. The president does not get involved in the business dealings of his son.
But let me be clear. Any American who wants to come home, we will get you home.
Well, unfortunately, they did not come home. Joining me right now to separate the truth from disinformation is Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson, who sent a letter to DHS Secretary Mayorkas this week asking for information about this Disinformation Governance Board, and James Comer, ranking member of the Oversight Committee, who has documented influence peddling by Hunter Biden. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us this morning. Ron Johnson, let me kick this off with you and get your reaction to this new division the Biden administration is starting, Disinformation Governance Board.
Good morning, Maria. Well, the First Amendment to our Constitution states that Congress shall pass no law abridging the freedom of speech. So we've passed no such law. The president's job is to faithfully execute the law, so he has no authority to do this. This is Orwellian. This is a ministry of truth. And the person they've appointed is a Democrat propagandist. She pushed the Russian collusion with the Trump campaign hoax. She pushed the hoax that the laptop was some form of Russian information campaign. Those are probably two of the most egregious and I would say effective piece of disinformation. They had more impact on our body politic, on our elections, than anything else I could think of, and certainly had a greater impact than anything Russia ever could have dreamed of. And she was leading the charge on that disinformation. You can't make this up. This is the exact person that this administration now has appointed to head this unconstitutional Disinformation Governance Board. This is outlandish. It should not be funded. It should never be established.
Well, I mean, we have the tweets from Nina Jankowicz right here. She told us that Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation. She told us that Trump colluded with Russia. I mean, it's all here in plain sight, Senator, and yet they're moving forward just like they moved forward with a vaccine mandate, which was also deemed unconstitutional. Is this going to pass? Can they do this with nobody stopping them?
Well, they just do it through executive order. I mean, they'll do it through the agencies. But again, they have no authority to do it whatsoever. In my letter, I asked Secretary Mayorkas, under what authority are you establishing this governance board? But again, they are brazen. They do what they accuse others of doing. They flood the town square with all kinds of information repeatedly, time and time again, and it's all about covering up. You know, Maria, we are now witnessing what President Obama, what President Biden meant when they say they were going to fundamentally transform America. They are fundamentally destroying this country with open borders, 40-year high inflation, record gasoline prices, and now something to abridge the freedom of speech. Every American should awaken to the urgency of the moment. Every American should be frightened about what Democrat governments and what Democrat policies are doing to destroy this nation. They are fundamentally destroying America.
Well, this is a very serious charge, and also it's quite an extraordinary moment in time. Congressman Comer, let's talk about some of the facts that you have unearthed. Senator Johnson has been working on this investigation in the Senate for years now with Charles Grassley. You also have uncovered specific facts about Hunter Biden and influence peddling, and we have these graphics here to indicate Hunter Biden's tax returns and government ethics filings. What did you learn this week that you can share?
Well, as you know, Maria, the White House and Joe Biden himself have always denied any knowledge of Hunter Biden's business dealings. They've always said that was a separate entity. But what we've learned this week through correspondence from Hunter Biden's laptop is that Hunter Biden's business partner not only made 27 appearances to the White House when Joe Biden was vice president, but also that Hunter Biden's business partner received Joe Biden's Delaware tax return, deposited it into Joe Biden's personal checking account, and then turned around and wrote a check from Joe Biden to Hunter Biden for money that Joe Biden owed Hunter. So this proves that not only did Joe Biden have a lot of access to Hunter Biden's business partner, but Hunter's and Joe Biden's finances were entangled. So this leads to a lot of questions that we've had. Is Joe Biden compromised because of Hunter Biden's business dealings with Communist China?
Yeah, and we have right here Joe and Jill Biden's federal tax returns versus the government ethics filings. We want you to walk us through what is most important for us to take note of in terms of Joe Biden's tax returns. He's got a federal tax return total income of $16 million and ethics filing total income of $9.6 million. What can you tell us?
Well, I could tell you that if you factor in Jill Biden's potential income, that there's still going to be a $5.2 million discrepancy in what Joe Biden reported on his federal tax income and what Joe Biden actually reported on his financial disclosure form. Now, this is very serious if you're in the executive branch at any level, especially president or vice president, and you don't disclose income. But we've got a $5.2 million discrepancy here that would lead one to believe that Joe Biden may, in fact, be the big guy, which we've all seen the email that said the big guy gets his 10% cut. Remember, this cut is from a partnership with Communist China. And if this is the case, not only did Joe Biden not disclose this on his transparency form, but Joe Biden has, in fact, broken the law and profited from a foreign national.
Senator Johnson, this is absolutely extraordinary, and you have also documented much of this. We have the 10% for the big guy email. What are your thoughts on where this investigation stands, even in the face of Biden coming up with this new division in government to claim that he's going to slap down on disinformation when, in fact, all the disinformation is coming from his office?
Well, Senator Grassley and I tried to warn the American public about the vast web of foreign financial entanglements of the Biden family and how that compromised the potential President Biden. Now we're seeing the compromise. In terms of the investigation, it appears that they're starting to investigate this. They've impaneled a grand jury. They're calling witnesses. But my concern, Marie, is that they'll gather the evidence, and then under Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, they'll enter some kind of plea agreement, a slap on the wrist, and part of the plea agreement will be to seal the records so the American public never understands the full extent of the corruption and the compromise of the Biden family. That is my concern. I think it's a very legitimate concern, and I'm trying to call it out publicly so that doesn't happen, because the American public deserve the truth. They have been bamboozled, they have been lied to, and it affects our national security.
And it's not just this last bit of it with Hunter Biden, but we've been talking about Russia, and the Russia canard now for years. I want to slip in a break and then ask you just about that, the potential of tipping the scales. Last week, former DNI John Ratcliffe told us to watch Merrick Garland and whether the AG will tell the U.S. attorney to go easy on Hunter Biden's federal tax probe. We're going to investigate that with these two gentlemen when we come right back. Stay with us.
Under what circumstances do you consider, or how do you evaluate whether you would appoint a special counsel?
I think this is a fact and law question in each case, determining and depending upon how cases go forward, and a question of whether the Justice Department, with its normal processes, should continue. I want to be clear, though, special counsels are also employees of the Justice Department. We don't have an independent counsel statute anymore.
Have you had any consideration about whether to do this? Or
again, I think our internal deliberations have to stay within the department.
That was Attorney General Garland testifying on Tuesday in front of the Senate Appropriations Committee on what he plans to do about the obvious influence peddling potential violations of Hunter Biden regarding U.S. bribery laws. I am back with Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson and House Oversight Committee Ranking Member James Comer. And gentlemen, we just saw that in Congress last week. Senator Johnson, where's this going? You just raised the issue of AG Garland perhaps tipping the scales. What do you think is happening here?
Well, again, whether it's a special counsel or a prosecutor within the Justice Department, they're going to be run by Attorney General Garland. So I don't trust him. We need to put pressure on the Attorney General to make sure that he makes public their findings, whether they indict or not. The American public needs to understand the extent that the Biden family has exposed our national security.
Well, I mean, James Comer, both Peter Schweitzer and Miranda Devine both told us that Hunter could be indicted over the near term. How do you see this playing out? And what do you believe are the most damning pieces of evidence that would lead to such a move?
Well, there's no shortage of evidence of wrongdoing by Hunter Biden. What we're seeing now is that Joe Biden is being connected into the Biden crime family and the influence peddling, and that's very troubling. It's very troubling for our national security. But I share Senator Johnson's distrust of Merrick Garland. You know, a special counsel would be okay depending on who the special counsel is. I don't trust Merrick Garland at all. Now, with respect to being indicted, I think there's already enough evidence to indict Hunter Biden on a whole menu of things. The problem is, and what I predict is, they will possibly indict Hunter Biden after the November elections, but before January, when Republicans hopefully retake the majority in both the House and the Senate, and then that would protect Hunter Biden theoretically from having to appear before a congressional panel with a subpoena. So I think that Merrick Garland has a lot of opportunities to protect the Biden family, and I think that we just need to keep pressure on Hunter Biden and continue to do what we're doing in both the Senate and the House, and being very transparent with all the evidence that continues to pile up against the Biden crime family.
Senator, look, you've talked a lot about what Hunter Biden has done and the fact that this is a Joe Biden story, not a Hunter Biden story. Tell us if he can get away with saying, well, I didn't even know who it was that I was dealing with. Well, you know, I didn't realize that these people and companies are specifically tied to the Communist Party. You talked about this on the floor of the Senate back about a year ago.
We have contemporaneous emails from Hunter Biden calling, for example, Patrick Ho, somebody he was paid $1 million to represent in his defense, I guess, when he ended up being convicted of money laundering and violations of the Corrupt Practices Act. But Patrick Ho, Hunter Biden referred to him as the spy chief of China. His other business associate, Devin Archer, who met with Joe Biden in the White House 5 days before Vice President flew out to Ukraine to become the point person on Ukraine. A couple days before Devin Archer became a member of the board of Burisma with Hunter Biden, Devin Archer is now a convicted criminal. Hunter Biden knew exactly the types of unsavory people he was dealing with, people connected to the Chinese Communist Party. So there should be no defense. And again, that is the extent that the American public needs to understand how brazen the Bidens have been and how they have put America's national security and our international policies in a compromised position.
It's just incredible. He calls this guy, Patrick Ho, the spy chief of China, and he sends him $1 million. Patrick Ho sends Hunter Biden $1 million. Real quick to you both, if you do get the majority in November, are these impeachable offenses on the part of Joe Biden? Will you move to impeach Joe Biden?
That's really a House question.
Well, I'll start with that. Certainly everything's on the table. I think the Democrats wasted a lot of time and energy trying to impeach Joe Biden. We want to start out on day one trying to correct a lot of the policies that Joe Biden has enacted. Legislatively, Joe Biden enacted these policies with the Democrat majority or by executive order. We need to get inflation under control. Okay. We need to get our border secured. And I think those are going to be the first two priorities for a House Republican majority.
And Maria,
gentlemen, thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead. Final word.
I just want to make sure the American people get the truth. The American people need the truth.
Yes, absolutely. Senator Johnson, Congressman Comer, thanks very much for your leadership and your work right now.